Title: Scientists believe something bigger than a giant squid exists. It starts with a scar. Not a legend whispered over a ship's rail, not a blurry photograph tossed around online. A pale ring on the hide of a surfacing whale, the size of a human palm, one of dozens that ladder the curve of its jaw as it exhales a pillar of breath into cold morning air. Each ring is a reminder that somewhere in the dark, the whale wrestled something with suction powerful enough to bruise, arms long enough to wrap, and patience enough to fight a creature that holds its breath for an hour at a time. We know of one animal that can do this. We've named it, measured it, held its glassy eye in the harsh lights of a ship's deck. But as more whales rise, scarred in patterns that don't quite match what we think we understand, a quieter question takes hold among the people who spend lives at sea and in labs. What if there is something bigger in the giant squid? For centuries, the giant squid was a story we told because the sea kept secrets. Sailors swore they'd seen tentacles like tree trunks and eyes like moons. And each time a bloated carcass washed ashore, its arms chewed by sharks and its body torn by waves, the rumor swelled all over again. It took until the 21st century to watch one alive, unfurling silver skin and ruby muscle in the flash of a camera deep in the ocean's half-light. Later, another emerged from the blue like a banner, a coil of living myth wrapped around bait lines. It was proof. Some monsters are real, and they're not monsters at all, just animals designed by darkness and time. And yet within that victory was a riddle. What we found was enormous by our standards, but it fit a silhouette we already expected. Meanwhile, a different set of clues piled up away from the spotlight. Sperm whales are the only predators that regularly dive to the depths and match a giant squid's reach with their own. They spiral down through columns of black water, sending clicks that rattle like loose bolts through the void. And then, somewhere below the last blue photons, they accelerate. The clicking quickens into a staccato, called a creak, a sound researchers can hear from a ship as a whale closes in on prey. Minutes later, that whale may surface crosshatched with fresh marks, some smooth-edged, some ragged from hooks, the geometry of each telling a patient observer what kind of arms dragged across its body. Patterns accumulate that suggest more than one big player is hunting in that zone. One with smooth suckers, one with hooks, and maybe, just maybe, one with something we haven't cataloged. On paper, the ocean looks mapped. From space, its surface shows every current and eddy. But the map that matters is vertical. The ocean is not a pond. It is a world stacked in layers. Between 200 and 1,000 meters lies the twilight zone, where the sun's last effort is a gray ghost, and eyes must dilate to the size of saucers to find dinner. Below that, the midnight zone steals even the hint of direction, and life makes its own light. Every night, a migration ripples upward from those depths, the largest daily movement of animals on Earth. Billions of fish and crustaceans rising to feed and sinking at first light like a living tide. This is the deep scattering layer, a sheet of life dense enough to paint sonar like a false seafloor. Predators follow that moving continent of food, and among the shadows that stalk it are animals we've barely met. We have names for some of them. The big-fin squid drifts like a marionette cut loose from its strings, with arms trailing as thin as wires, impossibly long. The colossal squid is heavier than its giant cousin, a barrel of a mantle and arms studded with swiveling hooks, built for cold southern water. Discoveries like these shift our sense of what is possible. Each time we learn that a cephalopod can live larger or stranger than we assumed, a door opens to a room we didn't know the house had. Scientists who specialize in squid, their beaks, their hooks, the chemistry of their buoyancy, have learned to read pieces of the puzzle without seeing the whole animal. Museums hold drawers filled with beaks found in the stomachs of whales. Those chitinous parrot-like jaws don't digest, they last. By measuring certain parts of the beak, researchers can estimate how large the squid must have been. Sometimes, the numbers don't line up neatly with any known species. Sometimes, they imply a mass that would dwarf what we filmed. It's not proof. And the people who sift through that stomach debris are cautious by necessity and by culture. Science resists dramatic claims for good reasons. But the hints refuse to go away. When we caught our first giant squid alive on camera, it was smaller than the maximum we'd predicted from dead specimens. We had underestimated not the squid's existence, but how unwilling it was to meet our lights and lenses. If another cephalopod hunts deeper, slower, and in sparser waters, then all the reasons we missed the giant squid for so long are multiplied. Even the physics leave the door ajar. There are limits to how big a squid can be. Its blue blood carries oxygen less efficiently than ours, and its muscles depend on a fine balance of cold water, slow metabolism, and buoyancy tuned with ammonia-rich fluids. Push too large, and you risk building an animal that cannot move fast enough to feed itself. But the ocean cheats these limits in ways that land cannot. In the cold Southern Ocean, metabolism slows without starving, and prey can be dense and predictable along the borders where ice births blooms of life. Buoyancy in deep water reduces the need to fight gravity. If a superlative squid exists, it would likely be an ambush artist, not a sprinter, a mass of patient flesh drifting at the edge of a living highway, taking infrequent, decisive meals. In a place like that, the clock of survival ticks to a different beat. The question isn't only whether such an animal can exist, but whether it leaves awake in data we already have. Naval hydrophones once recorded a low, rising moan so vast that imaginations leapt to enormous throats somewhere in the South Pacific. Later, the sound was pinned to ice moving in sheets larger than cities, groaning as they fractured. Other mysterious underwater signals have likely geologic origins too. If this is a ghost story, it isn't told through haunted noises. It's told through biology, through scars, through estimates on paper, through cameras that waited and waited in the dark until a shape finally grazed the edge of the frame, too close to the lens for the whole body to be seen, pulses of bioluminescence winking out in its wake like startled stars. The patience required to make sense of that kind of hint defines a life's work. There is another path to the answer, and it begins with the way squids see. Many deep-sea squids are attracted to bioluminescent distress, flickers that mean something is under attack and distracted. Ingenious lures mimic that signal, a ring of electric light meant to imitate a panicked jellyfish. Hang a camera near it, seal your lights against the dark, and wait for whatever hunts to investigate. The first time scientists tried this approach, they proved that the giant squid would come. Since then, they've refined everything: quieter rigs, darker housings, bait that smells like eel oil and crushed shrimp, careful descents to hover just above the deep scattering layer. They don't chase anything. They'll let curiosity come to them. To understand why some people in lab coats now whisper about something bigger, you have to watch what happens on deck when the water goes black. The ship's hull turns into a kind of night wall. A warm yellow rectangle of a galley door opens and closes, opens and closes. A graduate student with cracked lips tests a winch line frayed by salt. A senior biologist closes her eyes and narrates out loud to no one, recalling the geometry of scars seen hours earlier. They lower the rig, meter by meter, until the sea seems less like water and more like a listening device itself, pressing against every bolt and seam. It's not melodrama to say you feel small. Down there is space, gravity gentled, horizons erased, stars replaced by jellies that snap, by shrimp that ultraviolet themselves into invisibility. The camera lands in its patch of midwater and hangs, its false jelly pulsing. Minutes stretch. Lanternfish flare and cruise on. A shrimp the size of a fingernail ricochets through the frame, all angles and nerves. Then the rig wobbles as a current shears past. Somewhere far above, a whale clicks again, an acoustic metronome. The first real hunter appears as a smudge, then an outline. Not particularly large, an ordinary squid stitching the dark with quick arms, testing the light, and then gone. Another comes, this one braver. Something stranger follows. Familiar only through absence. The water beyond the lens seems to dim, just a few percent darker, as if the world has drawn a curtain over its own stars. The lure's pulses bend, refracted by muscle. The camera auto-adjusts, hunts for a contrast edge, finds none. It lasts a breath, no more. Then the blackness lifts, and empty water returns. On deck, nobody speaks for a long time. It could have been a school of fish, tight and shallow. It could have been the camera's own housing, reflecting a shift in current. It could have been nothing, but the biologist who has measured beaks for 3 decades stares at the screen, and thinks of spacing, of the way those circular scars bracket each other across a whale's jaw. Maybe it's the dream of finding the thing that has always been there. Maybe it's pattern seeking in a sea designed to mislead. Or maybe, properly tuned, the ocean is beginning to show us something we did not know to ask for. The next descent is scheduled for after midnight, when the great daily migration is near its peak, and predators that sleep by day turn awake and hungry. The winch squeals, the rig vanishes, and the ship's lights are dimmed one by one, until the ocean owns the night again. Somewhere below, a click becomes a creak, and not far from that sound, a shadow larger than our expectations slides across a galaxy of drifting life and changes its mind about whether to remain invisible.